Welcome! In this video we're going to do a bit of a review of lots of different note values that you're expected to know at like a late beginner, early intermediate to intermediate level. So we're going to start with the one beat note that you probably know. It's a circle coloured in with a stem and we call that a quarter note. Now if we want to make that smaller, we need to add a tail to that quarter note, and that we call an eighth. And if we want to make that smaller again, we can add another tail to make it a 16th. Now your eighths and your 16th, if they're not on their own, if they're beside another one, then they'll likely be joined together like that with a beam, or like that. And if we keep adding tails or keep adding beams, the notes get smaller and smaller. So it's a pretty simple system. Up from the quarter note, we have a half. And then we have a whole. Now sometimes we add dots to notes. The most common one you see, probably, or encounter at first, is a dotted half. And that's 3 beats. It's important to understand what that dot is doing though. It's not just making it 3, it's adding half of that note again. So if a half note is 2 beats, half of 2 is 1, and therefore 1 plus 2 is 3. But if we take a quarter note and add a dot, half of a quarter note, which is 1, is a half. So this turns into 1.5 altogether. If you take an eighth note and add a dot, an eighth note is a half of a beat, and half of that is a quarter. So this is 3/4 of a beat in 4/4 anyway. Now so far you've mostly probably looked at halves and quarters, but we can also divide things into 3. So if we draw 3 eighth notes down there and add a little 3 above it, this is a triplet, an eighth note triplet. And instead of each of these being half a beat in 4/4, they're a third each. Or you can think about the whole thing as being the same as a quarter note. Now let's look at some rests. So we can have a eighth rest, which looks like that. And if we want to make that shorter, just like adding the tails or beams before, we add another little squiggle there. So that's an eighth rest, and that's a 16th. The quarter rest is the one most people have the most difficulty drawing. So it's like a squiggle with a curl on the bottom, and that is a quarter rest. And then we have these two, which get confused a lot. So you have a half rest and a whole rest. Now the whole rest, that's a useful name because it is a whole measure in any time signature. So whether that's in 4/4 and a whole measure is 4 beats, or in 2/4 and a whole measure is 2 beats, that's always a whole measure or a whole bar. The half rest is 2 beats. And it's only used in some time signatures because, for example, if we're in 2/4, then a whole measure is 2 beats. So we use this one rather than that one.